Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar titled Addressing Gender-Based Violence Among Refugee Claimants and Women with Precarious Status. My name is Bahar Taheri, and I am the project consultant with the BC Refugee Hub, and I will be guiding us through today's session. I'm joining you from the unceded traditional territory of the Coquitlam First Nation, which lies within the shared territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, Musqueam, Kakite, Squamish, and Stolo nations. It is important for me to acknowledge the lands that I'm privileged to live, work, and raise my children on as a way of showing respect and honoring the Indigenous peoples of these lands. Acknowledgement for me is a simple way of resisting the erasure of Indigenous histories and working towards honoring and inviting the truth. ISSOBC's BC Refugee Hub would like to gratefully acknowledge the funding for this project from the province of British Columbia through the Ministry of Post-Secondary Education and Future Skills. We will begin with introductions and some Zoom etiquette, followed by an introduction to the BC Refugee Hub and the BC Safe Haven Resource Network. Then we'll move into our presentation with Rosa Arteaga from the Battered Women's Support Services. And then we will stop during the presentation a couple times for a Q&A session with Rosa, and then we'll wrap up with some closing remarks. I would like to provide a quick introduction to the BC Refugee Hub for anyone who may not be familiar. The BC Refugee Hub was established in 2015 by ISS of BC and funded by the province of British Columbia, originally in response to the arrival of Syrian refugee families. Now, our focus is on refugee claimants through the BC Safe Haven funding, which is also provided by the province of British Columbia. We offer a wide range of tools, fact sheets, and training sessions to support the sector and promote services across British Columbia. The BC Safe Haven Service Directory, which we will be releasing an updated version soon, probably next week or the week after. The BC Refugee Hub maintains a service directory for all the BC Safe Haven funded organizations, which is updated regularly. It includes programming details and direct referral contacts. You can find the link on the BC Refugee Hub, and I will post it in just a sec in the chat box for anyone who hasn't accessed it in the past. And you can stay connected with us through our weekly updates and monthly newsletters. We also collaborate regularly with our partners such as VAST, MapBC, and AMSA. Lastly, if you have any events, services, or program you'd like us to feature, please send them our way to refugeehub@issbc.org. I would now like to introduce Kieran Davis, who's the program specialist with AMSA, to provide us an overview of the BC Safe Haven Resource Network at AMSA.
Thank you, Bahar. I'd like to offer a brief land acknowledgement. As a provincial umbrella association, AMSA acknowledges that BC is on the unceded homelands of First Nations who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. We recognize the privilege that we have as settlers on this land and acknowledge that AMSA's operations are on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. As an organization, AMSA is committed to creating a safe space for Indigenous voices. The BC Safe Haven Resource Network is a collaborative program providing key supports to refugee claimant serving organizations in BC. The resource network is collaboration and partnership focused. It includes multiple partner organizations who play a key role creating resources for direct service providers. The BC Safe Haven Resource Network has 4 initiatives. The capacity building activities include webinars, fact sheets, and many other resources, as well as supporting organizations to develop humanitarian movement plans. Our mental health activities include in-person workshops, e-learnings, and information sessions, and a phone line for frontline service providers to get support as they work with vulnerable clients. Our language activities include the development of the BC Safe Haven curriculum guidelines, which provide guidance and information for those working with refugee claimants in language classrooms. And finally, our public support gathering is engaged through ACE's AMSIS charitable arm in partnership with United Way BC to build community support for refugee claimants, including public awareness, donations, volunteerism, and other community-based supports. I encourage you to connect with AMSA on LinkedIn, Facebook, and X, formerly Twitter, and visit our website at www.amsa.org for many resources, e-learnings, and recent reports. Thanks, and back to you, Bahar.
Thank you, Kieran. I would now like to introduce and welcome our speaker and topic expert today, Rosa Elena Arteaga, Manager of Direct Services and Clinical Practice at Battered Women's Support Services. We have been collaborating with Rosa for years now at the BC Refugee Hub, and she always brings a wealth of knowledge to our sector. Welcome, Rosa, over to you.
Thank you. So thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to collaborate with the Refugee Hub and all of you who are here. And I believe that we are here together because we want to ensure that women, girls, boys, gender diverse people, everybody lives free from violence and oppression. And unfortunately, a lot of our clients may be dealing with some form of gender-based violence. So I would like to introduce this topic to you. I know many of you may be familiar with it or already have a lot of training. And still, I want to acknowledge that this topic is hard because we have to witness sometimes pain and suffering. And sometimes we work with clients who disclose horrible things that humans do to humans, and we would like to do more. And sometimes people are not ready to take the steps that we think they should take. So I want to provide the information, but also the analysis about how gender violence plays a role in sometimes maintaining people in the same situation. So in order to support girls and women victims of gender-based violence, we have to explore the social issue of gender violence and its impacts on girls, women, boys, men, families, and the community. When we think about intimate partner violence, a lot of the times I hear from different service providers, oh, maybe this woman, she doesn't want to leave the abusive partner because, like, I don't know, maybe she likes to be abused, or I already gave her a lot of resources and then she doesn't want to move on. It's her fault, right? So it's very important to understand the contributing factors of gender-based violence. So for many of us who work with refugee, immigrant, non-status people, people with precarious immigration status, racialized communities, Black communities, we need to understand that one of the contributing factors to violence is colonization. And I can give you many examples, but if I think only about Canada, because this country was colonized, and unfortunately, the dominant group who colonized Canada were white men, right? So then, in the intersection of violence against women, what we see that happens within the legal system is that from the perspective of the legal system and sometimes even from society, they have this idea that some women deserve violence and other women deserve protection. So what we see when we do police accompaniment is that if the woman is from the dominant group and she's white, she's Canadian, she may have a better response than if she is a Black immigrant woman, right? Or if she sometimes even they ask about the status, right? And that contributes to gender-based violence. And for mainly talking about women, stay in abusive relationships. And again, capitalism, where we have told that women are objects to be abused and used, racism, sexism, and homophobia. And when I think about homophobia, it's not only about LGBTQ to spirit communities, gender diverse people, that of course, that I think has been a lot of education about how people get discriminated against and oppressed. But if we think only about heterosexual relationships, there is a lot of homophobia in the sense of men are expected to behave in certain way and women are expected to behave in certain way. And when one of the parties in the relationship try to change their behavior, then they are going to be punished by friends and families, right? Like, for example, women are told you have to keep the family together. Men sometimes are told you have to be the man of the house, or you are the one who has control. So another contributing factor is gender roles. You know, we doesn't matter where we come from, because I work with survivors from all over the world. If you are a cis woman and you identify as a woman, just specifically to that, there is this gender role that is imposed on us about how to be a woman, how to please men, how is our responsibility, the area of parenting. We have to be a good mother, right? And then the last one is religion. And for many of the populations we work with, they may come from different religious groups, and we respect religious beliefs, right? Of course, there is a lot of respect for the different beliefs. However, sometimes through the religious groups, there is a pressure that women have shared with me, that they are told by the church leader, oh, you need to just get to learn how to be a better wife, right? Or he is abusive and violent just because he doesn't have a job in Canada. He's a new immigrant and he's stressed. That's why he's acting like that. But what I tell women is the interesting thing is that it's very rare that women get violent just because they are stressed and new in Canada, right? In that, I would like to talk about intersectionality, because violence against girls and women happens all over the world. However, depending your social location, your economic and political conditions, then you are going to have different levels of access to freedom from abuse and violence, um, or even access to reproductive rights and self-determination. And I would like to show you the spiral of gender-based violence. This slide and this spiral, I show it all the time, has become like, I make the joke that has become like my Bible, because it's very descriptive of what happens to many racialized, indigenous, Black women, refugee women, who unfortunately are displaced from their countries. Or even here in Canada, indigenous women have shared with me that for some of them, they can identify that they have gone through those different aspects of oppression and gender-based violence in their lives. So if you see this slide, so for some of us, from the moment that we are born and identify as female, we already experience a level of oppression. And then maybe through childhood, some women are not allowed to go to school. They get abused by the father who is supposed to protect them. Is the first man in their lives who is abusing her. Then as a teenager, that continues growing until adulthood. So by the time that she comes to see you, she may not disclose everything she went through, but there are high probabilities that she went through different factors of gender-based violence, what we call multiple traumas, right? And at least with the work at Battered Women Support Services, I can tell you that at least 80% of the women who access our services have gone through this spiral of gender-based violence. Maybe for each woman it looks different, and everyone tries to protect themselves and to become free from this abuse. And that's why sometimes when they are with an abusive partner, they have already internalized a lot of violence. So in themselves, they sometimes tell me, Well, at least he doesn't drink. My father used to drink a lot and he was very violent. My partner only gets violent sometimes, but he doesn't drink. So sometimes the clients we support tend to compare with what they have been through, and they tend to minimize the current violence they are experiencing. And I think that if we work from a trauma-informed perspective, we could understand that it will take time for them to make decisions of making changes. So therefore, there are structures of power that get to dictate who is worth it and who is not, and is how women experience it. So talking again about the contributing factors of violence against women, that spiral of violence that I show you gets reinforced by this idea that hierarchy is normal within relationships, within families, right? It's usually the majority of us come from heterosexual families where the person who had the power was usually the father, and then he had the power, and there was not a space for the children and the mother to collaborate and to socialize in a way where everybody's needs are taken in consideration. Also, what we see not only within families, but we see it on TV everywhere, is that violence is an acceptable way of resolving conflict. Women are objectified, as I said. Women are taught to submit, especially to men, and men are taught to dominate, especially to women. And then when we think about intimate relationships, uh, abuse and violence is a systemic pattern of domination. So the abuse and violence, it doesn't start right away. It's not that the person got into an abusive relationship and was her choice. What many survivors tell us is that the violence and the abuse grows as time passed by, right? So in the beginning, maybe he was kind, and then he started showing some behaviors that she couldn't identify as abusive because she already comes from a society where there is hierarchy, where violence has been acceptable as a way to control each other, right? So there are many ideas that already she has internalized. So when the abuse and violence increase, it's really hard for survivors to really identify that this is increasing, right? And then what we also know is that the majority of women want the relationship to continue. They want the violence and the abuse to stop, but they already have been raised and trained to believe that the relationship has to continue, that the children need a father. So all of that creates kind of expectations that things are going to change and people can stay years in the relationship. And then once that they come to see us and they make the decision of leaving, I have many survivors who tell me later on that they don't understand how come it took them so long to leave that relationship. But it's because, unfortunately, survivors have been brainwashed to continue believing that things can change. And also, in an intimate relationship, the tactics escalate over the time. And what they say, sometimes when they call the crisis line and we make an assessment, she says, he hasn't hit me. Maybe I shouldn't be calling you because he's abusive, he's emotionally abusive, but he hasn't hit me. And so sometimes for survivors is if there is no physical violence, then it's hard to identify that they are in an abusive relationship. And what starts happening is that the woman changes her behavior in an attempt to stop the abuse. So what survivors tell us is, I was cooking different kind of food because he didn't like my food, and if he didn't like the food, then he got angry and throw the food. I had the house clean. I only wore the clothing that he told me I should wear. So they start changing the behavior because they think that if they change the behavior, that is going to stop the abuse. So I have a power and control wheel that I created specifically for refugee, immigrant, and non-status women, just to show the different layers of what women go through. if you see, for immigrant and refugee women, they have to go through the system of immigration, criminal system, housing, family, social services, mental health. So there are many factors that need to be in place for them to whether being able to leave an abusive relationship or to get support from those systems. But unfortunately, sometimes those systems tend to oppress people, and then it's hard for them to make the decision of leaving. So for many refugee women, they come sometimes with an application that was filled out by the partner, and then they don't want to expose the partner. Sometimes people say, "Oh, when we go to Canada, my partner was very abusive. I didn't know he was like that." Sometimes I explore with them, and actually, the violence didn't start in Canada. Then, once that we make an assessment, they disclose that there was violence at home. But again, they thought that when they come to Canada, things were going to change. For many of the people we work with, at the same time that they are dealing with violence, they are also adapting to changes that follow migration, right? So if you don't have a support system, if you don't have a family, you lost your culture, you lost your, maybe language is a barrier. The only person that you have that is there for you is the same person who is abusing you. And again, that's why for us as support workers, it's very hard to support them to make changes right away. But what we tell survivors is we are here to support you. We understand you are adapting to these changes, and we are going to provide as much information as we can. So eventually, you can make a decision of living a life free of abuse or violence. When we think about violence in intimate relationships, what we see in many of the cases that come to our attention is that physical abuse, sexual abuse is always a threat, but doesn't mean that is currently happening because, as I explained, violence increases over the time. So maybe when they come to see us, they are dealing with just financial abuse, emotional abuse, maybe threats. Maybe the person, in this case, the partner who is abusive, maybe breaking things at home. So it's very important for people we support to understand that unfortunately, if it's only emotional abuse, we cannot call the police. And I can explain later more about what are the specifics within the criminal code that is considered a crime. But many survivors of intimate partner violence need to know that is the right to call the police to have protection if there is physical violence, sexual abuse, if he's breaking things around, if he's making threats that he will kill her if she leaves. Those are factors that are considered a crime and is in the criminal code. But sometimes we get some calls from women who are very angry for the violence, abuse they have experienced, but then the evidence they have is only emotional abuse. So what we see in the different tactics is that a lot of abusive men use isolation. So they won't let the woman go to access resources, to learn English, to connect with her friends. Emotional abuse that I imagine you have heard many examples and is very straightforward. Then using coercion and threats. That's a very important one because many of the people we support, they may say he hasn't hit me, but he says that he's going to call immigration and get me deported. Or he hasn't hit me, but he says that he is going to take my children away from me and that I won't have power. So coercion and threats is very common. And again, with coercion and threats, he's not considered a crime unless he's saying that if she leaves, he's going to kill her. The next one is using intimidation, that I guess is straightforward, and minimizing, denying, and blaming. This is very important tactic that many women have told us that that is crazy making, because, for example, he is telling her, "Oh, you should keep the house clean." And then one day she's tired and she didn't clean the house. So then he comes and yells at her or slaps her, and she tells him, "You are abusive, like why you are doing this?" And then he may say, "Oh, it's because you didn't clean the house today." So then women start thinking that the violence that they are experiencing is their fault. So every time that they try to expose what you are doing is abusive, the person, in this case, the partner, the husband, will be minimizing, denying, or blaming her, saying, "I didn't want to push you, but you forced me. I didn't want to do this, but you make me do this," right? And then, unfortunately, when you hear that over and over, you start believing that it's your fault. Then using children is also straightforward, and it's very important to communicate to people we support that in Canada there is a child protection. And I find that that is very helpful with immigrant and refugee women when they are stuck in the relationship, because if the father is abusive and he's maybe violent towards the children, then if she doesn't call the ministry, someone else is going to make the phone call. And I have had cases where the children get apprehended, even though the mother is not abusive. But then when we go and open the file, then the ministry is claiming that they were neglected. So I explain that to women. I say, you are not abusing them, but under the Child Protection Act, there are the categories that are considered abuse, which is emotional, physical, sexual, and neglect. So in your case, you are going to be seen as neglecting your children because you are not protecting them. And if you don't take action, someone else is going to make a phone call, and then may take months to get your children back, right? And when I am clear and expose that to the woman, sometimes she wants to take action right away. Other times they, depending what is happening, then they take some time to think about what are the steps they want to take. And the last one is using male privilege, right? Maybe having a job, being a man in that context that I gave you before about having more power over her, having more control, even family, having an extended family who is also abusing her because he's the man, so his family abuse her, or even her own family telling her, "Well, he's the man of the house, so you have to suck it up." So I just want to briefly talk about the myth of mutual battering, because I have had a number of immigrant refugee women who have been arrested as a result of their partner being the one who calls the police, or when he feels that, or when the police comes, she doesn't disclose what's going on, and then he lies, and then we have done police complaints. And so what I want to say is that based on the data collected by the criminal system, 80% of the crimes are committed by men against women and children. Then 17 something percent of the crimes are committed by men against men. And only 1% of the crimes are committed by women against women and children. So the statistics show us that is almost 80% of men committing crimes against women and children, right? So when some people tell me, "Yeah, but women are also abusive," I always say, "Yeah, some women are abusive, but we cannot compare the number of women who may be abusive and the power that those women have to abuse others. We cannot compare it to the number of men who are abusive and who come to the attention to the criminal system." So whenever a statement is made about mutual battering, meaning oh, two of them are violent in the relationship, it's important that we ask ourselves the following questions. Who has suffered the more extensive physical and emotional damage? Who has adapted their behavior and lifestyle preferences to the greater extent to please the other? Who has superior social status and privilege by virtue of their gender, social class, race, and culture? Who has superior physical strength and skills for effective assault? So, in one of the cases where this refugee woman was arrested, her partner was taller than her, stronger than her, and he lied. In that case, we were able to demonstrate that he lied. But still, she got arrested. And that's why I say that sometimes the criminal system, unfortunately, is misogynist and racist, right? So, and then we ask the question about what is the history and pattern of abuse in the relationship. And we work closely with police, mainly in Vancouver, and we always tell them, right? She wants to give her statement, and she wants to give her statement about what happened on the day of the incident, but also she needs to share the history of the abuse that she has been experiencing, because that would make her case stronger. And also, this is the last one that is very important. Which violent act is an act to install terror and control? And which violent act is a response to terror and control? So I had a woman who wanted to leave, and then she got the car keys and told her partner, I'm leaving. I just cannot take it anymore. And then he started fighting with her. And then she threw the car keys, and the car keys fell on his toe, and his toe got red. Then he called the police, showed his toe to the police, and she got arrested because they considered that she had assaulted him. And she was trying to escape from a situation. So it's important this question about which violent act is an act to install terror and control, and which violent act is a response to terror and control. So let's talk about a framework where we collaborate with women who seek our support to deconstruct the societal expectations that both oppress them and limit the right to live free from violence. For example, when women tell me my children need a father, I usually ask a question about what kind of father do you think your children deserve? A father who is violent and is emotionally abusive towards the mother, who the children may be scared of him, or a father who is loving, caring. So this partner you have right now is not loving and caring towards your children, right? So children need adults who are role models, who can guide them into life. And as a child, is very painful to live with a lot of fear in your household, right? So I make that visible. I have those conversations with women. So it's very important to understand that we respect their self-determination, but we always put at the center safety. So when we think about self-determination, supporting our clients towards strengthening their self-determination so they can empower themselves and seek safety for themselves and their families, right? In my case, I don't like to say that I work from empowerment because, yeah, I don't have power to empower. I believe that the power I have is to make visible the power that people have to find resources, to make changes in their lives, and to understand that they are going to do it at their own pace. So when you are doing this kind of work, it's important that, of course, you familiarize yourself with resources for women who have experienced intimate partner violence or gender-based violence in your area. And you are doing it even by attending this webinar. Thank you. Listening to women's needs and concerns, like I usually ask a question about what is stopping you from leaving? What is stopping you from accessing this support? What is stopping you from making these changes? I don't make it about her because I understand that the person is not the problem is the problem. So she's not the problem is that she's trapped in an abusive relationship. Gather basic information about her situation. I'm glad someone was sharing the legal aid information. So of course, as if you have access to resources, if she needs a lawyer, and if you think that she's eligible to apply for legal aid, the more information you have, the better. And do not let culture to excuse violence in intimate relationship. This is very important because I am an immigrant myself. I work with a lot of immigrants, and I hear it all the time among survivors. They tell me, oh, yeah, you know how it's in my culture is like this. In my culture is like that. And I always say, I don't think that culture is encouraging violence. Culture doesn't say that you should be in a violent relationship, right? And even I have sometimes with workers, lawyers, when I'm presenting, they tell me, oh, but I need to understand more how to work with that culture. Violence is violence and abuse is abuse, right? We can understand the context, the background of where people come from and areas for opportunity, but we don't let culture to excuse violence. Explore with her what she needs at the moment and provide the appropriate resources. Again, we usually make plans for short-term goals and long-term goals, right? We are not saviors, we cannot rescue people, but we always can make a plan with them to provide information for what is doable within the week and what she may need during the month. Respect her confidentiality because I know some of you may be working with the family as a whole, and then all of a sudden she disclosed something. So it's important just for her safety to respect confidentiality, validate what she has already done to keep herself safe. You know, survivors have been in the abusive relationship longer than what we have been with them in that appointment. So it's important to ask them, how have you keep yourself safe so far? What kind of steps, what kind of plans you make to maintain your children and yourself safe if you are still in the relationship? Assess and provide a safety plan. Ensure she understands her rights in Canada. Ensure she has access to an interpreter who she can understand. I have had interpreters because I speak Spanish, so sometimes there is an interpreter, and I can tell the interpreter has his own judgments about the woman, and he's no, no, don't ask that, or the translation is not exactly what she's trying to say. So just pay attention that she has an interpreter that has done some sensitive training about these issues. Acknowledge that she may not understand the Canadian system, even when you have explained it. So even for Canadian-born people, when they have to deal with criminal system, family law system, it's very hard for them to understand how things work. So even if you explain it one time, just make sure that you repeat it again. Whenever possible, make a follow-up plan with the woman. Remember that you may be the first person in Canada who she can trust. So we always say that we are meeting women where they are. Women are the experts of their own experience and their healing journey. Violence against women is the result of systemic oppression. This is very important to maintain. And there is these ideas from society and in some organizations and institutions, they have this wrong idea that women should resist oppression, then they should leave oppressive situations. Once that they leave, they should recover from abuse and violence, find a job, and happy everly after, right? Stay immune to trauma. Unfortunately, there are different ways of resisting oppression. It never looks the same, right? And for some women, sometimes the way they resist is by staying in that relationship because they need to maybe finish their immigration process. Maybe they need to make sure that they have a job before they leave. So we need to just take in consideration that it's going to look different, right? And I want to talk about safety assessment and safety planning and crisis intervention. Uh, Not specifically for you to do it, but to have this broad understanding, because many people have asked me about that, right? So it's important that when we do a crisis intervention, we listen for limits in the woman person's thinking and understanding, right? Um, because let's say, what is stopping you from leaving? Oh, it's because I don't have a place to go. Yeah, but I already gave you information about transition houses. Yeah, but I cannot bring my furniture there. And I bought this table that I really like, and you told me I cannot bring the table. So maybe for some of us, maybe like, oh my God, this doesn't make sense. The priority is her safety. But for her, she's attached to that table because maybe has all this meaning that she had to save money, like different things. So it's important that when you feel that something is limiting the person, before we have a judgment, just to try to find solutions, right? Can you leave the table with a friend? Can we, like, let's explore what other options can be available, right? Things like always, never, good, bad, right, and wrong, try to eliminate that. Oppressive internalized ideas on gender roles and gender expectations. It's important that everything that they have internalized, you support them in externalize them and making that visible. Like the example I gave you about uh, my children need a father, or is my responsibility to maintain the family together, or justifying and saying, oh yeah, he's violent, but it's because he cannot find a job. So we need to deconstruct that idea, right? Or he only gets violent when he drinks. Or some women say, oh, I feel sorry for him because when he was a child, he was traumatized by his father. That's why he's abusive. So those are internalized ideas that we need to deconstruct and help the person to change. And again, when we think about a safety assessment, we need to understand if there is sexual abuse. Some people may disclose a little bit. What we know is for many immigrant refugee women, sometimes there is sexual abuse, but they won't disclose it because they think that is their duty, is what they have been told. Oh, if you are married, you have to satisfy your partner, right? And again, if that gets disclosed that, oh, he's forcing me to have sex with him in ways that I don't like it, we need to have those conversations and just to ask, what would you prefer? You know, how do you take care of your body? Is your right, even though it's your partner, is your right to take care of your body, right? To understand that you should be free to choose what you want and what you don't want to do. So just by having those conversations, I have women who access our services that they tell me, oh, I went to see this worker somewhere else, and then she asked me a question, and by asking that question, I just started thinking that I needed to do something, right? So financial abuse, also that, as you already know, some survivors are not allowed to have their own bank account, intimidation of threats. For example, this idea that if you go to the police, I'm going to get you deported, you won't be able to stay in Canada. That's something that we can stop right away. And we can tell the survivor that he doesn't have the power to call immigration and get her deported, right? Unless she's working under the table and she doesn't have any documents, then he may call and say something. The immigration may go to the workplace. That, of course, I understand. But I have many women who even are on their PR. They already have their PR and they are scared that they are going to get deported because he has been saying that. It's important to also explore if when you think about that spiral of gender-based violence I showed you, this person who is coming to just get support may had been traumatized or may had experienced multiple traumas growing up, which is very common, right? That we see it in our work. And again, it's important to let them know that if there is a possibility to access counseling, to work and heal and process what happened to them in childhood, that is key for them to become free from the abuse that they are currently experiencing. Because also what I see with many immigrant refugee women is that they said, oh no, the past is the past. I don't want to talk about that anymore. I have moved on. I don't want to feel pain. And if you are trauma informed, you will understand that if you don't process the past is going to keep you trapped in the present, and it's going to impact your future. So it's what I tell survivors. And then you may not have many cases of child brides, but I have had a couple of cases where young women have disclosed to me that they came here as child brides and now they are married with an older adult, and the extended family is treating her like a servant, like a slave. So if that is disclosed, again, it's important to provide information. And then for arranged marriage, unless it's an issue for her, also we can externalize how oppressive can be that she was forced to live with someone that she didn't choose. Other women say, oh no, that's how it is in my country and I'm okay. Then we respect that. But if that is externalized or comes to our attention, it's important to also invite that conversation. That is not okay to be forced to live with someone that she didn't choose or doesn't want to live, right? So we understand that many refugee and immigrant people do not trust the police because they may have come from countries where they were tortured, criminalized, or disregarded by the criminal justice system. Also, we know that for many women, calling police is the last resort. Make sure that you clearly explain people's rights and responsibilities as it relates to the criminal justice system. So as a person living in Canada, she has the right to call the police if there is sexual, physical abuse, death threats. It's her right to call the police, and police should respond uh, in a decent way. They should follow all their internal practices. But that's why it's important that if you can refer her to a victim service support worker, that would be better, because then a victim services support worker can make sure that she's provided with all the support and the responses that the criminal justice system is expected to provide. When you're doing an assessment, it's important to understand what is happening right now, right? So she may disclose that a month ago he was violent, but now he's not violent anymore, right? Um, and then is when people tend to minimize the abuse. What are her feelings about the situation? Does she feel fear, panic, insecurity? Asking questions about her feelings, not getting lost in the story. So, as support people, sometimes we ask questions because we are curious and we are only feeding our own curiosity, right? But it's not helpful for the person. So be always aware of why you are asking her a question. Are you asking her a question because you already have a judgment about her, or because you want to rescue her? Or are you asking her a question because you are trying to make an assessment about what has happened in the past? What is the current situation? What is the problem right now? The actual problem. The woman is not the problem. So, what is the actual conflict in question? What can a potential solution or alternative be right now? What are her needs? What can contribute to stability and de escalate crisis? What role can we play in facilitating those situations? So, again, as I said, referral, externalizing the problem, visible for her, ensure that she understands that she deserves to live better. And this is very simple, but when we have experienced childhood trauma, we think that we don't deserve anything. And when we are given just a little bit, then we are happy with that little bit that we are given, right? So if you have the opportunity to tell your clients, you deserve to be treated with respect, you deserve a better life. Even I have immigrant women who, when I start helping them to leave an abusive partner, they said, but I won't have an income. And then I said, we can help you to apply for income assistance until you get set up, and maybe you can go to school, or we can help you to with the employment program we have here. We can help you to engage again into the workforce. In the meantime, your income can be through income assistance. And it's just so interesting because many immigrant women don't want to access income assistance. They feel so proud and they said, oh no, I don't want to depend on that. And so it's important to let them know that that is available. And even though maybe feels strange to get that money, that is going to help her to just move forward. So when you are going through a safety assessment, it's also important to ask her if you can call her back and ask her if it's safe to call. Because sometimes support workers forget to ask that question. So ask the person if you can call her by using your first name and the organization, um, or if she prefers that you don't call or you block the screen. If she says that it's not safe to call her, now that she has disclosed that things are going on at home, then ask her if you can make a plan B. This plan may include calling a friend or family member. Let's say that she told her partner that she was going to go to the supermarket, but then she came to see you. And she wants the legal information or the resources you're going to provide, but you don't have it available. So you may make a plan to call her friend or someone she trusts for you to leave that information with that person, right? And I know email communication is something we use a lot, but some women may disclose that also he has access to her emails. As a person, if it's safe to call and block the number you are calling from, she may want you to hang up if her partner answers the phone. We also have had that she has told us, call me, block your number, but if he answers the phone, just hang up. And then we just wait until we can get a hold of her. She may want you to say that you are a friend and to provide a different name. Safety plan if a call goes to voicemail. If it's safe to leave a message, ask her if it's safe to leave a message, what kind of message is safe to leave. And again, this may be straightforward, but many people forget to make plans around even basic things like calling her back. So, and again, this is important, and I know many of you already know how to gather this information if she's willing about precarious immigration status. Why do we consider that she's under precarious immigration status, right? It's because maybe she got married with this Canadian person and now she is in Canada and she doesn't have a status because she's waiting for the sponsorship. Uh, has he submitted the sponsorship? Because I had a case where um, he was abusive and physically violent, but she didn't want to call the police and she wanted to wait for the sponsorship to get done. And she came to the office and then we call immigration just to get an update. So with her, we put her on the phone and then we called just saying, oh, can you tell me where is my application at? And then she was told that there was no application. He hadn't done anything, right? So now she doesn't have a status and her visa is going to expire. So it's important to gather as much information and to try to let them know it's important that you have your documents, that you know what kind of a status you have, what documents you have, what is the source of income. She may have an odd job or a family member is sending money from overseas. She may be working underground. If this is the case, remember to provide information about the risk of working without permit, which we have had cases where the abuser calls immigration and let them know that she's working underground in a restaurant. Then we also tend to gather the partner's information to understand the safety issues, right? Has this person ever been abusive or violent towards your client prior to coming to Canada? Um, does this person have power to affect your client's immigration status? That is an important question. When we talk about safety issues, does he have access to weapons? And when we ask that question to the person, because she says, oh, he hasn't hit me, he only has made threats, then we tell her, okay, does he have weapons? No. Has he made threats using a knife? And she says, yes. And we tell her, we also consider that a weapon because it's dangerous that he's making threats using a knife, right? Physical violence, it's important that they describe what kind of violence they have experienced. And a lot of women share about strangulation or choking. So it's very important that when this act of strangulation is made visible to you, that you let her know that you are concerned for her safety. And we consider strangulation a high risk factor because we have witnessed that in many cases, maybe her partner didn't want to kill her. He just wanted to maintain control over her, or he got very angry and then he started like putting pressure on her neck. But then, unfortunately, because he was very angry, he didn't control how much pressure he was doing. So then we have had cases where women get killed. And when we go to court and the perpetrator is there, he's crying and he's saying, I didn't mean to kill her. I didn't want for that to happen. And it may be truth. It may be truth, that's why we tell her because she says, oh, I don't think that he will kill me. You know, many men do that. They in my country, or many men, so women tend to minimize that because nothing has happened to them. But strangulation is very common, and it's something that we need to let her know that we consider that a high risk factor. Also, it's important to ask her if she has called 911 before and if she's willing to call 911 and what could stop her from calling 911, right? And I know that when someone brings to our attention that they are experiencing violence at home, we usually tell them, well, if you don't feel safe, just call 911. But it's important to engage in that conversation, right? That how to make the phone call, her right to call 911. Sometimes they have their children who have learned in a school that if you are in danger, you call 911. So I had a case where the woman had two boys, one was 12 and 10, and then they are the ones who ended calling 911. And the police came, arrested the father who was being violent towards the mother, and then they took the woman to a transition house, right? So sometimes even they may not disclose to the child that please call 911 if your father gets violent, but maybe they say, yeah, there is a 911 number in case that we don't feel safe, anyone can call. And in this case, that worked for the woman that her children call. So physical safety is important, right? Threats of being deported, as I said, it's important to let her know that he doesn't have that power, but he's making threats. Threats of harming or killing a family member here or abroad, Also, that's something that can be exposed to the police, because we know for refugee immigrant women, sometimes that has happened. I had also a case where he was making those threats. And in my head, I thought, I don't think he's going to do it. And the next thing I know, he had gone to her country and he was um, making the threats that he was going to do harm to her family member, right? And we had to call the police here. So that is considered a crime too. Uh, they need to ensure that, again, the children's safety, because uh, we have cases where when she discloses to him, I don't want to be with you, I'm getting support, and eventually I'm going to leave, then sometimes he disappears with the children. So what we tell women is, please don't share with him all the information I'm giving you, even though you feel strong and you feel that now you know so much and that you are empowered by all the things that you can get in Canada. Then until you are in a safe place, then you can say whatever you want to him, but don't do it before you leave your place, right? Because again, I have very sad stories that have happened, because whether the woman got empowered and then she tells him, and I'm leaving you and I'm doing this and that, and then he gets violent, or he takes the children away. Or we have a case where the woman shared with her teenage son that she had a place, she had rented a place, and that her plan was to leave the abusive stepfather. And then that younger boy told the stepfather, "Oh, when we don't live here anymore, can I come here to play video games with you?" And he's like, "What?" So then the boy ended disclosing um, everything, and then it ended really bad. So make sure that you always tell people you support not to share her plan of living with her children if they are not adults who can keep that information, or not to share it with, of course, the person who is abusing her, or with family members that sometimes they think that um, they want to support the relationship by sharing things, right? And that's why we ask survivors, is your family your support or is a risk? Is your community support or risk? Because sometimes people outside, when she discloses knowledge, information, or action that she's going to take, people think that by sharing that with the perpetrator, maybe they are trying to help her, right?
Thank you so much, Rosa, for your time and your
Thank you.
expertise, and providing us so much, information from your experience. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today, your dedication to supporting newcomer refugee claimants, newcomer government-assisted refugees and immigrants, and for your time today in learning and gaining the skills and knowledge from Rosa, who's our amazing topic expert today. Thank you, everyone. I hope you can take a moment. This was a heavy topic, so I hope you can take a moment to, um, a little self-care after this very heavy topic. Thank you, Rosa.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.